Welcome to the Simply Be Found Huddle, where you have Dean and Rob, where we talk about business and all kinds of different stuff in marketing. Today we have our guest, Chad. Chad, how are you doing today?
I'm doing well, man.
Awesome.
Glad to have you with us today, Chad.
Yes.
Excited to be here.
Yeah, can you tell everybody about who you are before we hop into wherever this conversation is going to go, since we do everything completely raw and uncut. So kind of tell everybody about you.
Of course, I'll make it simple. Who I am at my core is I'm a husband first, I'm a dad second, and then I'm a business coach third. And so I get to work with entrepreneurs that are looking to scale their businesses, particularly in the creative space. That's where I come from, and we can get into some of that history if we want to. I started a media production company in 2009, sold it in 2021. And through that process, found that I just loved supporting other entrepreneurs, other founders that are wanting to do something bigger than themselves. And really, if I were to boil down my work, the essence of it is making them less significant in their business so that it actually can become something bigger than them.
Awesome. So when you're doing coaching, no, go for it, Dean.
Oh no, I kind of go. Do you actually do the work for them, or do you actually coach them on what to do? I mean, try to give them advice and let them run on their own, or is it a hybrid of both of those things?
It's a lot. I do mostly coaching on the coaching side. So I'm working with them intimately along the process using a system that I've developed that I call the scaling system. Really clever name. One of my principles is clear is better than clever. And so we work a system. It's usually most of my clients I work with for about 3 months. My accelerated clients I work with for 12 months. So 3 months is kind of that getting the toe wet, getting in there, develop. That's my accelerator. We really develop the foundations of being able to scale. And then if they want further support, then they jump in with me for about a year.
Oh, okay.
So when you're scaling them, do you typically have creators that come in that want to be able to scale to be able to sell their business, or are you looking for more just where they just want to grow their business to, get to a certain point?
It's as unique as the human being. Every single person that comes into my realm of influence has some unique version of their goal. Some of them want to sell. A lot of them, especially in the creative space, they don't believe that what they have could be sellable. So that's one thing. That's one of the things that I can open their eyes and mind to, is that if that's attractive to you, then we can do that. We're also talking about creatives that got into the business because they love what they do and they couldn't imagine themselves not telling stories. And so selling is usually a lot of times just completely off their radar. They're like, I want to do this till the day I die. Why would I ever want to sell this thing? And at the same time, they're stressed beyond belief. They're not doing the kind of work that they want to be doing. They're overwhelmed, burnt out, all of that sort of stuff. So it's like that, it's that balance. And I would say most of my folks just want to build something meaningful and stay in it.
So I know that you said every business is unique, and I get that 100%. Do you see a trend of who you're coaching? Are they like small entrepreneurial groups that they're a one horse show, or are they a small business with maybe 3 or 4 employees that can't really afford a staff, but they know that they need to be doing things? Kind of give me a feel, because our market is kind of the 1 to 10 employees. Do you think, Rob? I know that we got some bigger ones than that, but a lot of people that come on board start with us on that size scale.
Same demographic for me. Most of my clients they usually have about 2 or 3 employees. They're usually doing 700, 900 annual revenue. But as I mentioned earlier, they're very much in every fiber of their business.
Right.
Now, what kind of creatives do you typically usually work with?
So my background is media production. So I owned a video production studio. And just by nature of my history and connections, it tends to be video production studios. That also bleeds out into marketing agencies and studios that can bleed out into photography, motion graphics, social media management, really all of that in the creative space. But those are kind of the tangents that come. The meat of it is really video production studios.
That's a neat space, and that's a space that's changed a lot over the years too.
Oh my gosh!
I mean, it's absolutely crazy. I mean, one of my biggest things about being on other podcasts, and especially the AI stuff, is I'd go in, I'd be in those podcasts, and they would be like, well, it takes us, 3 months to edit our videos. And I'm like, for a podcast? Not like, what are you doing?
Not going to work.
We've gotten to the world where it shouldn't take that long. And I'm like, well, we have to send it and you do all. I'm like, you do all that. That's like what we used to do back in the 2000s, and not now, not in 2025.
Yeah. That's one of the major challenges that I'm working with them on a daily basis. They're flipped upside down, because what worked 4 years ago, and 4 years, that's not that long.
It's not that long.
But what worked 4 years ago does not work today.
No.
And yeah, anyway, it's wild, man.
Well, I mean, so do you try to get like businesses to start a YouTube channel, do things like that, or are you looking more for the social media aspects, or what if you were to tell a business to get started, getting information out there, where would you tell them to get started at?
If I'm supporting a business on the media side, so not my clientele, because my clientele are the ones actually creating the media for businesses.
Okay.
But if I'm in that role and I'm consulting, right? If I'm still on Shade Tree, which was my business that I sold in 2021, and we're helping them create content, the first thing that we talk about is story, because facts tell, stories sell. That's just the way it is. And most entrepreneurs love their business so much, and they love the results that they create, that they want to go out and talk numbers and facts, which is valuable. I'm not saying it's not valuable, but it's not the place to start. The place to start is with the story.
Correct.
If somebody can envision themselves in the story that you're able to tell well and clear, then they will stay interested long enough to find out the facts. Right. And only until then, because they have to be able to imagine themselves. We are storytelling creatures. That's been the mode of communication, meaningful communication, for the history of human beings. Right. And so that's the place I tell them first. We got to get clear on how we're going to tell this story in a meaningful way that people connect to. Then we can start talking about features and figures and all of that sort of stuff.
Well, you got to bring them into your story, and you got to make them the hero for who you're selling to.
That's right.
Because that's where everybody kind of just loses most of that. That you get either a business, especially in the creative world, from everybody I've worked with, and I've worked with a lot of agencies. We still work with agencies, and they're stuck in what they've been doing for years, and it's changed. It's a completely different market for how you're going to be able to sell to that business owner when you're going and you're coaching to be able to get your business to be able to grow and go to that next level. Yeah. And I see a lot of them hit a bottleneck. Now, probably one of the biggest things I've seen, and I'm curious if you see it as well, inside of the creative space, whenever I've done coaching or consulting or any of that, now this is going into my venture capital and merger and acquisition days of everything I've done in that world. But I see a lot of the creative space and I see business owners just in general. So it's not just the creative space, but they're their own worst enemy when it comes to scaling. They start to hit a point that starts to feel uncomfortable, and then they start to do stuff to almost self-sabotage themselves when they get to that point. Do you see that a lot? And has that changed over the last year with how AIs kind of came out and kind of how the world's changed?
100% see that and completely agree. I would say my accelerator, the essence of my accelerator is inviting the entrepreneur, the founder, to get out of their own way. They are the stop. They're the bottleneck. They are the thing that's preventing the company from growing, which is such a paradox when you think about it, right? Because they're thinking, I created this thing. I should have my hands in every bit of it. It should be mine. All the ideas should be mine. That's a natural way of thinking for something that you created, but ultimately it needs to grow beyond you in order
Right.
to keep growing. And by the way, I also meet with entrepreneurs who say, well, I'm not really interested in growing. And my answer is, well, if you're not growing, you're declining. There is no, and growth doesn't have to look the same for everybody, right? Growth can just be growth in improving the product. It doesn't have to be revenue or team members or whatever. But if you're not growing in some way, you are declining. As we're noticing, you bring up AI. If you're not willing to learn how to utilize AI even in your bespoke creative business, you are declining.
You are.
I agree.
And I think one big fact to that is that we all do it. We all do self-sabotaging things to ourselves.
Yes.
I mean, I was talking with a couple of my EAs this morning, and I'm like, just, I don't need to go through and check what you just did. Just post it. If it's wrong, we'll fix it.
Yeah.
It's not going to be that big a deal, but I don't want to look at it. Just do it.
Yes.
But to get to that point, so if I went 5 years back, even during this whole entire journey that we've been on, I've always wanted to have that control side. And even though I've told people over the years, do not do this side, don't make yourself the only person inside the business, that little voice is still there. But then there's a bigger voice the older I get and the more experience I've brought to the table of, don't do that. Stop it. Yeah. Now Dean's going to go to the whole entire point of Bob Newhart and just stop it. But I mean, it's
I'm from a different community and generation. Bob Newhart was big back in the day.
I love Bob Newhart.
If you've never seen the "Just Stop It" thing, YouTube it. It's a pretty awesome piece. But I mean, that's where businesses, we want to be able to have all this control, and you have to let go of that control a little bit to be able to let people be able to fall and make mistakes. When I was doing the whole merger and acquisition and the whole venture capital, and we were buying and selling companies all the time, that was probably why second and third generations didn't make it the most inside of business, is because they never let those next generations fail. And they have to fall on their face, and they have to pull themselves up, and they have to be able to learn from those pieces. Because if they don't do that, they're never going to be able to learn what you've learned of how to be able to fix it. Now, you don't want to have your whole entire business crash, and it becomes a very fine line there, but it's setting those pieces up.
Yeah.
Which I think is very interesting. And it doesn't matter what business you're talking about.
Yeah, I would contend that actually you have a higher likelihood of crashing with the control mechanism rather than the empowerment mechanism, right? So right. I talk about architecture or architecting over control. You're not the controller of your business. You're the architect of your business.
I agree.
And of course, and just that little mindset shift. And the other thing I was thinking about when you were saying that is, are you guys familiar with Dan Martell?
Yes. Yeah.
I love, he's brilliant. He talks about the pain line, right? Yep. So Rob, you mentioned the pain. Yep. And his whole thing, which I use every day in my coaching, is that the pain is an invitation. When you're feeling the pain of whatever it is in your business, it is your business asking for you to release control somewhere. It really is.
Yeah. And that control piece is where usually that self-sabotage happens.
Yeah. Exactly. It's
that in between that mindset to be able to kind of go there. And the person that probably brings that up, I think, does it almost better than Dan Martell in that is Oren Klaff. Have you ever read any of his books or listened to him? He's a good listen. He's a guy that goes in, does big venture capital deals, and sits at big tables and gets a bunch of stuff to happen. But he talks about the whole caveman days and all those pieces. So when you look at all the different guys that are inside of this, you have your Dan Martells, you have your Donald Millers with Story Brand, you have Oren Klaff, you have Gary Vee, you have all these people. They're basically following from the same principles. And if you follow those principles, you can take that all the way back to Dale Carnegie and How to Win Friends and Influence People, to each of those pieces. I mean, but history has always been the same, especially when it comes to businesses. Now, Dean wrote a piece and it never got published. We've talked about this a few times. You got to rewrite that piece to where most entrepreneurs are also have a lot of narcissistic behaviors.
Yes.
And I agree on that because I have some. I'm not
them.
narcissistic, but I have some.
I think you all have to have a little bit of it to be an entrepreneur. You have to think that you're better than everybody else, or to a point, because if you don't think so, then if you think, oh, everybody else is better than me, then you're always going to be in that bubble that you're never going to, like you said, improve yourself.
It's what brings the control out. So if you
Yes.
think about it, it's that narcissistic behavior that then brings the control. And when it gets uncomfortable, you over control, which then self-sabotages yourself.
Yeah. There's something that I tell my clients every single day, and they hate it. They hate it, which is there are people that can do it better than you in almost every aspect of your business, except one, which is architecting, designing. Nobody can design your business like you can because you know what you want your business to do for you in your life.
Right.
So it's subjective. Now you might be able to hire, when you get a little bit larger, you might be able to hire some CEOs or COOs that can buy into the vision and continue to create what you want. But for the level of entrepreneur that I'm working with, that's the only thing that you can't hire somebody to do it better than you. I promise you.
Do you know one of the hardest ones to get for minds to be able to get that across is? I would say creators would be really hard for it. Your small business, like your contractors, they'd be hard for it. But probably your worst ones that are out there that I've ever worked with are your inventors.
Yeah. Oh, I could imagine.
because they feel like that I'm the one that created this and nobody else can create it. And then they'll go do something stupid like, there was once this guy who had some kind of fishing lure attachment piece that he was wanting to have investment done, and he's the one that comes to mind. And then he goes and he shows Eagle Claw all the plans and shows him everything. And it's like, well, you just lost it because they just solve your plans. Yes, you have a copyright on your plan, but they'll beat your copyright out and they'll just go in because they have money.
Yeah.
And a couple weeks later, I saw it, I saw ads that it was starting to come out and now it's already on the shelf. And I'm like, well, you can't do that. I know you're excited to share all that, but you just totally self-sabotage yourself by sharing that much information.
Yeah. I was an internal consultant for a spinoff company from Elon Musk's SpaceX. He was the founder of it, was one of the partners in SpaceX. And then he spun off and started creating a more niche piece of space equipment. I don't understand any of it, by the way. I understand people and human beings. That's why I had a space at the table. And they're having challenges working together to meet deadlines and to actually make the launches happen. And when I was in there, what I realized is that the founder, even though we're talking a bit more of a scaled company, the founder still in that inventor seat. I'm just, relating to what you're talking about. His fingers were in everything. And everybody was scared to take action because what if he didn't like it? What if it didn't meet his standard? And so everything was bottlenecked and they were missing launches. And so they were losing funding.
Yeah.
And so it was just an interesting, I completely see that. It's such an interesting space where you are the creator and then you've got to license others to take your vision and run with it and probably improve it.
Yes.
Well, I think the interesting piece to that is what happens is, okay, so you get this founder or you get, the architect of the business. He comes in or she comes in and has all this stuff going on, which most would have that narcissistic behavior. A lot of business owners have ADHD and all these different things. That's what makes us just tick. And we're able to go super fast inside of our business. We have all these thoughts. We have all this knowledge that's up here. And when staff sees that, and when you're going really fast, you're spitting stuff out quickly. Hey, that's not how I would do it. That's not what we do, because that's where we feel like we're teaching on that side. But what comes across to a lot of staff members is you want to have control over everything. Nothing's ever going to be to your level. That feedback comes across as a negative instead of a learning opportunity to be able to grow from it. Do you agree on that?
I absolutely agree. Look, all of this that we're talking about, this isn't just me talking or preaching like Pastor Brown. This is all stuff that I discovered in my business that I failed at
100%.
long enough to learn the lesson. Thank God I learned the lesson early enough to save what was being diminished, right? Because we got very quickly in that business, we started servicing large brands like Volkswagen, Pixar Animation Studios, and it was just, it was so intoxicating, the clout that came with those brands behind me, and then starting to speak from stages. And me and my business partner at the time, we were 50-50. We were everything to that business. Everything lived and died on our decision making.
Yep.
And we were traveling more than 300 days out of the year to all of these production shoots. And, and meanwhile, my family's feeling abandoned.
Yep.
And, I, as my wife and I unpack it later on, years later, we were in a much worse position than I ever realized.
Divorces are made of those.
What's that?
Divorces are made of those.
100%. And that's the road we were on. And divorces, we had high turnover with our personnel because I was not leading well. I used them as tools rather than as contributors. And ultimately it came to a point where me and my business partner said, we can't do this anymore. If we do this, one of us either going to get ill or we're going to get divorced or something's going to happen. And we can't continue to just find more and more people to come into the business because that's expensive. And so we sat down. When we realized this, we said, we give it 6 months. If we can't figure this thing out in 6 months, we will close the doors. At the time, we're doing like 1.4 annual revenue. We've got all of these big clients, and we were dead serious. We're done if we don't figure this out. Luckily, hired a business coach. Didn't even know a business coach existed. I didn't even know it was a thing. And the first one we hired, so luckily, was high impact, very clear, got us straight in our minds first. And then the clarity in the mind came to the business, and then we were able to turn it around over some, a lot of work. But I share that story because I don't want anybody listening to this to think that I'm like preaching from some podium. Everything is failure after failure and willing to go again and discover what actually works.
So one of my favorite analogies based on what you just said there, Chad, is even the greatest athletes in the world have a coach. Because you can't see what you're doing to yourself. You need somebody to look in from the outside and give you some advice. It's advice that you can mull over and you can discuss, and you don't just take it verbatim. But they say, "Oh, if you would go to the left instead of the right on this particular situation, you're going to be better off." So it's just having that outside set of eyes to help you to see things, and that's what we try to do with a lot of small businesses when they ask us for coaching advice. Is we're looking at it from, we're not emotionally attached to it.
Yeah.
And we're going to try to help you. And I think that's kind of what you're saying as well. Happened with you personally, but that's what you do with your business as well.
Yeah.
I definitely agree to that. So if you were going to go, Chad, to a business and say, if you're going to put yourself as that architect, what would that perfect scenario look like?
The perfect scenario would look like you are consistently evaluating your time. You understand your buyback amount. Dan Martell.
I was going to say Dan Martell right there.
Yep. Another model that I use because it's super powerful. And I'm always bringing my clients back to the facts because business is emotional. Like Dean, you were talking about coming to it with neutrality. That's a practice.
Yes.
Maybe easier for some, harder for others, but especially for creatives, it's a very emotional endeavor. And they want to make the decisions in their business based off of what they're feeling. And I always tell them, let go of the feelings. Let's look at the facts. So I invite them to do, if they want to work with me, they have to do a 2-week time audit in 15-minute increments. And what we will do is then we'll place each of those tasks that they audit, we'll place a value on it, what you could pay to have it done by somebody good, right? And they'll start to notice they have their line, a threshold, their buyback timeline, and anything below that, we start working towards delegating to somebody who could do it better than they could for cheaper.
Well, you have $5 tasks, you have $10 tasks, you have $25 tasks, then you have $50 tasks. Whenever I've done those kind of audits.
Yep.
Yeah, so this isn't a new concept. I'm older.
No.
In the 80s, I was flying on a jet airline. I sat next to this gentleman. He goes, "I'm starving to death." And I looked at it. I went, "What do you mean you're starving to death?" And it opened a conversation. He was owned a very successful business. And he goes, "When I'm being creative, I pay myself $100 an hour." Because this is how he paid himself. He did his own audits. And like you're talking about, when I'm sitting on an airplane, I can't work. I can't do anything. That's only $5 an hour. I'm starving to death. And so what you're saying is so important. And it's reflective. It's not new, but I think people just need to realize that time management is so important in understanding where you're spending your time and the value to your business. Yeah. So I think that's a great point that you made on time management.
And the effect that it has is it trickles into every other area of the business. What I've noticed, this is you're right, Dean, it's nothing new, but what shocked me when I started doing this with my clients is how it bled into every other area of the business.
Right.
Profitability, clarity around communication, all of that moves with their time management because now they're consistently evaluating, is this for me or is it for somebody else? And if it's for somebody else, it has to be communicated to them so clearly that they can do it better than me, right? And so within that clarity, you're starting to crystallize everything in the business that was nebulous or that was generalized. I mean, I can't tell you how many entrepreneurs I sit down with, and you guys have probably experienced the same thing. They're doing anywhere from 500 to 800,000 annual revenue, and they don't even know what their numbers are.
They have no idea. So when I'd go in and buy companies, when I was working at the venture capital group and we were doing all the stuff that we were doing there, we'd go in and we'd audit books. And that was one of my jobs I did. I would have to audit from beginning to end. They were paying for shit that they didn't even know they had. And it's not the big stuff that's going to come in and kill you. It's all the little nickel and dimes that you forget about. And as
Death
a
by
business
1,000
owner,
needles.
right? And as a business owner, we've all done this.
Yes.
I've done it probably this month. I look at something and go, I need to cancel that, especially with subscriptions online. I need to cancel that. And then the next month, man, I forgot to cancel that because I got a phone call. I had to go run here. I had to go do this. That happens all the time.
Yeah. Yeah. And my tone, I don't want my tone to come off as judgmental because, again, I understand it. I have been there and will be there again. I've gotten better at catching myself. My tone is my passion for this. There's so much available for you if you're willing to look at the numbers.
And I think when it comes to numbers, it doesn't necessarily mean that you need to add staff. It doesn't necessarily, if you want to scale and make more money, it also doesn't mean that you need to add more clients. Sometimes especially inside of the service area, and Dean, I'm gonna pick on you for this one a little bit. So Dean's other business is screen printing and embroidery and that kind of print shop.
Yeah.
So it fits into that creative spot in a different kind of way. But it doesn't necessarily mean that you need to go out and get more. It means that when you hit a certain point, you charge more. Because sometimes adding 1,000 more clients inside of your piece would actually make your profit less than it would make it larger.
Yep. There isn't a magic formula for any business. there's, you have the vision involved. What do you want out of this thing? You have variables like your products. You have variables like the skill level of the majority of your team. All of that plays into what scaling looks like. So anybody that's trying to feed you some bullshit about like, oh, you just need more people or you just need to sell more. I was listening to one of your guys' episodes and you were talking. I just so enjoyed the conversation because of the nuance that existed in it, which was maybe you don't need more clients. And in fact, maybe if you got more clients, it would break you.
Right. Oh, yeah.
I'm trying to remember who that was with. Was that with Chad?
I think it was just both of you.
Or not with Chad.
I think
You're Chad.
You and I, Rob. We were.
Yeah, I was thinking it was just the two of you.
It was just you and I? Okay.
Yeah.
I was thinking it was with Chris. There's one that we recently published with that.
I think it was I don't know. We were talking about some of the home services and things like that. Yeah. I think we were talking about. So
yeah.
But I mean, you have to be able to charge what you're worth. And I think inside of the creative space, especially, and I think a lot of entrepreneurs don't do this. I've been guilty of it. We've been guilty of it, of not charging, what we're worth on something. So like when you're talking web design, when you're talking that, because it takes time. And it comes down to the same principle of, a famous artist being inside of a restaurant and someone comes up and goes, oh, will you draw this for me? And he goes, it'll cost you this much. And he quickly draws out this whole piece and hands it back to him. And they go, I'm not going to pay that much for that. I mean, it just took you 5 minutes. Yeah, but it took me 30 years to figure out how to be able to do that.
Yeah.
I mean, there's principles that come into each of those pieces.
And the question that I ask after I hear, charge what you're worth is, how do you know what you're worth?
It's what the market bears.
The market bears.
Well, maybe I've got a different idea. Not different. Right. Maybe it goes along with it. But if I'm selling you, if I sit down with you two and I say, okay, let me sell you a video. The value of what I'm selling you is quite low. But if I sit down with you two and I say, hey, tell me what problem you're experiencing in your business. Oh, we need more leads, or, oh, we need a higher closing rate, or, oh, we, this or that or whatever. Let me show you how a simple video could solve that problem for you. Now the value of that is much higher.
Right.
And so what I work with my clients on is they're so caught up in self-aggrandizing the video, right? Because that's what they do and that's what they value, and they love telling stories, and they bought all this expensive equipment and blah, 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 and they think the value is in the video. But then they are shocked when nobody values it. And I teach them, you must sell a solution to a problem. And when you can sell a solution to a felt problem, your value increases exponentially. I have clients within 3 months, they can 4 times their prices by the way that they're selling to their client. And it's honest selling. It has to be honest selling, right? It has to be, you have to actually think or know that you can help them solve that problem with your product. If not, you're just going to burn yourself, and that's going to be bad. But anyway, so that's my take on how do we determine the value of our product.
I just heard you say something that I really find that, because we're always trying to say the same thing. Don't just sell your product. You have to sell a solution to the person looking for your product.
Yeah.
Am I going to solve your problem? This is how I'm going to solve your problem. I think so many businesses miss that whole point, don't you? I know Rob and I have this conversation a lot, but you got to solve somebody's, like you talked about the facts and figures. That's great that, I've sold, all this and I've done all this stuff, but I've solved your problem and this is how I got there. Mm-hmm. So I think that's a really important point.
Yeah, I think it is too. I think it's one of those things to where, especially with video, what are your problems? What are your time management? What problem, what do you spend most of your time doing? Because it's not that video, but that video solves taking out that time.
Yes.
It's no different than when I talk about video, or we talk about video, and we break down how video can be used. You can cut a video, you can get a transcript, which is then it's going to give you the blog, which then is going to give you the social media content, which is going to give you all these pieces, and it gives you your evergreen content inside of your marketing. So being able to say that video is going to be able to give you all of this, and it's going to save you this much time and this much effort, to where then when someone asks that question, you have a video to go to, or that training, or whatever it might be, because now you have something to go to be able to pull that information off of. You can also take it to the next step further on that, and that video is going to allow you to train your AIs to be able to think a certain way and have your language. Then it brings the natural language piece into that.
Absolutely. I have a quick client story that I can share around this, if that's okay.
Yeah, go for it.
So I was working with a client. He came to me, established business, 6 years in the business, and had a good base of clientele that he'd been serving for a long time. There's a specific niche that he was working in, and he couldn't figure out how to get that value up inside the niche. It was in the dental space, right? And he'd been working with dentists forever, but he had seemingly hit a ceiling of what he could sell them. And as I worked with him to interview his clients to find out what challenges they were having in their businesses. What common challenges are you having in your business? Because the way he was approaching them first was, hey, let me make a promo video for you. Let me make a brand or a doctor video for you. It instills trust. It can be on the website, all of that sort of stuff. Okay, great. Cool. That is a problem. But come to find out, when he was willing to actually sit with them and find out what their biggest problem was, which was training and continued education for their staff. And when he developed a video product where all the dentist or the office manager or the hygienist, all they had to do was sit down for an hour and a half and record 5 videos in that time, and then it completely freed up all of that. They were training videos, so it completely freed up all of that time that they were spending repeating themselves every time a new assistant came in, every time a new office assistant, something like that. And they had this library, and they could just sit them day 1 through 3. That person just sat down, watched these videos, and then performed the tasks. Then he went and approached each dentist with that package, and his individual client value went through the roof like 2 times, because now he was solving a very specific felt problem that they had with video. But he couldn't even see it until he was willing to sit down and ask them, what's the biggest problem you're experiencing? What's the challenge right now?
Well, the thing he also created, which I'm not sure if he's even realized it yet, but by doing that, he's also created a reoccurring client, because when things change, that means he has to come back and re-record the video.
Bingo.
And that's where, inside of the marketing world, you would have to stay on top of that. It's making sure that you're sharing that information, sending them an email every once in a while and be like, hey, just wanted to check in, see how things are going. Anything's changed in your business? How are those videos going? Are they still relevant? Are they any of those things? Because that's going to be able to, one, bring value. And then he can also sell new products on top of that by mixing that into that message, but bringing them value to where it's not just sell, sell, sell. How are things going for you? It makes them talk about themselves versus all that, and keeps it relevant when things do change.
Yep.
Because it's going to change.
Oh, yeah. Yes. That is the constant.
I mean, that's the biggest piece there. So going back to the whole entire architect piece, I've got one more question on that. So when someone is doing that dream job of the architect piece that we talked about, how do you coach the business owner for them to be able to train staff to be able to treat them like an architect?
I love that question. So when you come into my accelerator, one of the commitments you make is that you will never perform a level 1, 2, or 3 task without recording yourself doing it. So get a program like Loom or whatever that's a screen recording program. You can even do this on Zoom. If it's just a solo Zoom call with a screen share, the tools aren't a problem, but don't ever from here on out, don't ever perform a level 1, 2, or 3 task without recording yourself doing it. And you don't even have to do anything with the recording yet. Just have it in the bank. Then once you identify your highest category of, and it's different for each industry, but when you identify a category that has the highest level 1 or level 2 tasks in it, that's the next role for you to hire. And you can hire that. You can get a contractor. You could get a full time. You can get, whatever that needs to look like for your specific situation in budget and time and all that sort of stuff. Then when that person comes in, you hand them all those recordings and you say, watch these, take the transcripts, put them into ChatGPT with a prompt that says, give me a detailed step-by-step SOP for this task. That in 5 seconds, 30 seconds, ChatGPT gives you a full SOP with step-by-step and a checklist. I have this prompt for them, right? They can just plug this in. So you have the SOP, you have the video recording, and then once they have all of that, they perform and have watched it and studied it. They perform the task with you, with your oversight and your feedback. And then after that, they've got it. If it's the right person, they've got it. So
I practice that all the time. So I'm glad to see you and I are on the same page, because it's a huge piece.
Yeah.
There's different tools out there like Scribe and all kinds of stuff that you can do to be able to put your training manuals together. But it's about just making sure you do it and don't overwhelm them day one. And there's going to be other stuff that comes up, because when you're the architect, if you're using that analogy for it, when you're the architect, things are constantly changing, or you have to tweak things because they might not work the way they did a couple of months ago.
That's right.
Or even a couple of weeks ago, depends on what industry you're in.
That's right.
But I mean, it's an absolute huge piece. It's kind of like I tell everybody for our staff is, if you're not asking me questions, you're not doing your job. Yeah. And you don't have to, because everybody inside of the world likes to go through and try to find, well, certain people, I guess it's not everybody.
Yeah.
They like to go out and try to find answers. And I'm like, no. And that's where it's like, no, I'm the expert inside of this. You still have to come to me, because that's where that architect piece is. It's that hierarchy that's inside of there, in my opinion. Do you agree on that?
I definitely agree. If we're not asking questions and giving feedback, then we're not paying attention to what's going on in our business, right? So part of the job of the architect is to pay attention and make sure everything is working together the way that it should, and then be willing to give that feedback or make those changes that are needed. And so one of the things that I hear all the time especially from busy, burnt out entrepreneurs is like, I don't have time to build systems into my business. I've got clients to take care of. And I tell them, you really have no excuse, because it doesn't cost you any more time, maybe a little bit more time to hit open Loom and hit record. But after that, the weight is on your people. And to take that recording and develop a system around it. And in fact, what happens most of the time is, if you have the right people who want to invest and get the vision, they feel a sense of ownership in building that system, and they're going to own it, and they're going to create something that works for them, as long as it's done the way it needs to be done. So anyway, I want to dispel this idea that it's going to cost you so much time to build this. I might as well just keep doing it.
Yep.
Well, here's the deal with that. So when you record the Loom videos, from my experience, or do any of those pieces, you actually catch yourself when you rewatch those on things that you could even improve yourself on being able to do it.
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, I love when I do a task and I'm recording the video and I'm like, why the hell did I do it that way? I can go back. I can improve that. I mean, come on. Why am I doing it why am I spending so much time doing that?
Well, I'm
Yes.
going to pick on Rob. He does the videos so damn fast sometimes. You go, what did he just do? And then EA looks at it, go, I don't understand what just happened. So
Exactly.
anyway.
And I know, Chad, that you have a hard stop inside of today's recording and everything, so I want to respect that. If anybody wants to get a hold of you, they want to find you, read your materials, or any of those things, and hire you as a coach, where would they find you at?
A couple places. They can connect with me on LinkedIn, just Chad Brown. There's a lot of them. So, Chad L. Brown Coaching and Consulting is my company. So if you're looking on LinkedIn, you can check to make sure that company is in the profile, and that's me. If you're not watching this, if you're just listening, you can also go to founder-freedom.com. That's my website. I have a free scaling mastermind workshop on that website. Or email me, chad@chadlbrown.com.
Sounds great. So
Perfect.
I think we've kind of.
Well, thank you for coming on today. If you ever want to come back, let us know.
Yeah.
This was fun. I love the banter. I love the relaxed nature, and really willing to play with ideas.
I appreciate it. All right.
Well, thank you for coming on. We appreciate it.
Thanks, guys.
You have a great day.